make sure you can see my shirt. Can you see it? Spooky vibes. Hi everyone, Chelsea Studio here, and today we're doing a spooky painting and I want you to paint along with me. What's up guys? Welcome back to the studio. So like I said, today we are doing a spooky themed painting and I want to do it kind of like a paint with me style. You know those like painting with a twist or sip and paint or whatever they are. I want to make this video in a way that you guys can actually take it and pause it and do the painting yourself at your own pace. The painting idea that I had was I thought that it would be really cool to do a Jack Skellington because he is the Pumpkin King, but I wanted to do it in like a cool way, and I actually saw a picture online of Jack as the Scream face with the little curly hill cemetery in the background, and I thought it was genius. Although I think instead of doing like the Scream face, I'm gonna have him doing that one where he like pulls his teeth down whenever he's trying to scare Lock, Shock, and Barrel. So I think that will end up being like a great painting, and I think it'll be super easy because of all the simple colors. So we're gonna start with your supplies list and what you might need, and then we'll go ahead and start. As far as supplies go, what I have here is a canvas. I have a palette to mix colors in. You can use one of these. They were like $6 for $1 at Dollar Tree, or if you don't have anything that's reusable, you can always use something that you were gonna throw away, like a fast food lid or something. I have some assorted sizes of brushes. I have a water bowl. I'm gonna end up using 2. And then I have 6 colors: black, brown, white, yellow, purple, and orange. On this slide, I have all optional supplies. On the right, we have some acrylic gesso. That's if you want to prime your canvas. Most canvases come pre-gessoed, but if you want an extra layer of smoothness, you can gesso your canvas. Then I have a couple extra colors of paint, a Sharpie that I kind of regret using, but you can use it, and we'll talk about that later. And then on the left, I have an acrylic additive that slows down the dry time of acrylic paint so you can blend it together better. I didn't end up using this, but it is a good option if you like to have your acrylics last longer and not dry as quickly. And then in the middle, we've got some sealants. I will end up using the gloss varnish, but the Mod Podge is another good alternative if you don't want to buy the actual varnish. And the last thing that I have here is a rag that I have dedicated to painting. You'll want something that you don't mind getting dirty and having it stay dirty because acrylic doesn't come out. So we'll be using this to clean up any excess paint or water off of our brushes. So you'll definitely want to make sure that you have this handy because I use it throughout the entire video. Before we get started, here is the final product. That way you can more easily see what I'm trying to draw as I'm drawing it on the canvas. This does have some extras on it that are optional. You do not have to do the extra steps, and I will tell you whenever I start doing the extra steps. But for now, this is what it's going to look like. One thing not on the supplies list that you're going to need is a pencil. I have a mechanical pencil here. I'm starting with the bridge and then I'm going into drawing Jack. Remember, this video is designed for you guys to pause as needed, so if you want to pause it and draw a chunk and then pause it and draw another chunk as you're going, you can definitely do that. I did use a reference image for the Jack head, so if you need to do that as well, you can. And then I decided not to put him in his tux because I wanted him to look a little bit more like the Scream guy. And then I draw the 3 rail posts and then the 2 rails above the bridge. And then now I'm going to draw the curly hilltop from the movie and a big moon. I didn't have anything big enough to trace, so I just freehanded it, but you can trace if you want to. And now I'm just cleaning up the edges. I do wipe away all of my eraser shavings with a paintbrush. That way it doesn't smear the pencil. Alright, so after you're done with your drawing, you are ready to start painting. I have put some purple paint in my little paint tray. I make sure that my brush has water on it before I start, so I'm going to submerge it in the water. You'll see I have 2 water bowls here. I have one for an initial clean, which is the glass one at the top, and then the one at the bottom is for like a secondary clean, just to make sure that my brush is clean. And it also will help me later when I need to add like clean water to paint. So I definitely recommend having 2 if you can. But then I got my bigger brush, and I'm going to go ahead and just paint around the moon and the hill in this purple color. I went ahead and changed brushes because I got to an area where I needed to add some smaller details, so don't be afraid to change your brush anytime you need to. I change brushes a lot. I also, you'll see, painted the bottom part of the hill behind the railing purple, and I didn't mean to. And I realized it a second too late, and I was like, what? But yeah, so I end up painting that purple, but it's okay because the hill's black, so it will be covered up later. And then I got an even smaller brush to do the spaces behind Jack that I couldn't get with the other brush. So now I'm gonna go ahead and add the brown, but it's kind of gross and it looks old. So I need to basically reactivate it, and as long as it's not super dry, if it's just chunky like this, all you need to do to activate this is add a little water to your brush and just little bits at a time slowly mix it in, and that will reactivate it, and you'll have a brown that's just like new. I'm painting in the brown of the bridge, and I will end up switching brushes also. As you're painting the bridge, you might notice that you're seeing a little bit of the white canvas come through. That's totally okay. We're gonna end up going over it again with another layer of paint. So just fill in that brown bridge and all the railing. Don't forget that you can definitely change brushes if you want to get better detail, just like I'm doing. Just make sure that you completely clean your brushes in between. That way the paint doesn't dry on your brush. And don't leave your paintbrushes in the water. It actually ruins them. So just make sure that's clean, and then once you rinse it off, dry it off with your rag that you have on the side, and just set it aside. So now go ahead and do a second coat of that purple. If your purple is a little bit more opaque, then you might not need to do this, but mine was really, really transparent, so I wanted to go in with a second coat. By the time that you're done with that, the bridge should be dry, so you can go in and do a second coat if you need to. So I actually end up cleaning out the brown from the palette because I don't want it to dry in there. So this part's optional if you want to clean them out as you go. I just think it makes it easier to clean up at the end if you do clean up as you go. But again, it's not completely necessary. And your next step is going to be the orange paint. So you're going to put in some orange paint and then paint the moon behind the hill. You don't have to be super careful on the edges since we're going to cover it up, but just try not to overlap it just yet. We will overlap it whenever we start using the yellow, but for the orange, I think it's a little bit too opaque and you might not be able to see your lines. So I completely cleaned out my brush, and then you'll get some yellow and put the yellow in your palette. And if your yellow reacts as mine did, being a little bit, actually way too transparent, then you can add a little bit of white to it. A little note about white: if you are gonna buy cheap paint for this, which you totally can, it's not gonna hurt you if you buy some cheap paint. But if you know that you're gonna want to do more acrylic paintings, I would suggest spending a little bit more money on your white paint, because a lot of white paints are just as see-through as the paints you're trying to mix them with. So the one I used was the Liquitex Heavy Body Acrylic white paint, and it went from like 30% opacity to like 70%. So it's super, super helpful to have a really good white paint. So add your yellow. You can try and go around the hill if you want to, but we're gonna end up trying to blend that yellow into the orange. So it might be easier if you just paint over it the way that I did. And if the orange is still a little bit wet, then it'll make that blending a lot easier, as long as the strokes you're using are following the contours of the moon, meaning the curve of the moon. And then you'll add a little bit of orange to the outside of the moon and just blend that back in with the yellow, and it should look like it's glowing. If you don't think that the middle's bright enough, you can add some yellow to the center like I did, and then just add a little orange, add a little more orange around the edges if it gets too light. Another tip here is saving paint. So what I'm doing is putting the paint back in the bottle, even though I have mixed the yellow with a little bit of white. So how you do this in this kind of bottle where it's like the squeeze tube is you take the cap completely off. You're gonna tap the paint to the bottom of the bottle, squeeze the air out of the bottle until it's just barely coming out the top. And then whenever you put your paint on the top using your brush, you just slowly release the bottle so that there's not as much pressure. It creates a vacuum and pulls the paint back into the bottle. This part's optional if you don't mind just throwing away the paint. Since I mixed it with my expensive heavy body paint and I was going to use it mixed with the white anyway, I wanted to put it back. And so I do that a lot. I like to save the paint when I can. The next thing that you're going to paint is going to be the halo, like the glowy halo around the moon. So take a little bit of your white and mix it with the purple, and then you're just going to paint around the edges. If your paint's too thick like mine was, you can add a touch of water to the tip of your brush and mix it in with the paint color, and that will help it be a little bit more smooth. And then you're just going to follow the contour of the moon, and gradually as you get closer to the edge, just less pressure and blend it into that background. If it's having trouble blending like mine is, you can see here, then you can go back in with the darker purple, and that will blend it together just kind of like we did on the moon. And take your time. Remember, you guys can pause this. Take as much time as you need. To make it easier, I kept the purple underneath the railing, the darker one. That way we didn't have to be confused and blending in that small space. And here you can see that I still, for some reason, think that this is going to be purple, even though that's the hill in the background. So here I'm putting the orange back in the bottle. You guys are free to do that if you'd like to. And now I decided to clean my palette again. Just be careful not to drip paint on your painting like I did just now. And then I dried it off with a rag. That's another good reason to have one, to clean out your palette if you're using something reusable, which I do recommend. So now you're going to add the highlights to the bridge. So here I have a mixture of yellow, orange, and brown. Just a tiny bit of each. You don't need a lot. And then I added a touch of water as well to help them mix together more easily, because remember that brown's a little chunky. Or at least mine was. You might have a perfect brown. If this doesn't come out to be the color that you want, you can always add more yellow, more brown, or even more orange. I end up adding more orange just to warm it up. But no matter what you do to it, it's going to be a really nasty looking color on this bright white palette. But I promise once you add it to the bridge, it looks right. I promise. Once you have a brown that you like, you'll just take one of your smaller brushes and you're going to add just some random lines to the brown of the bridge. And it's okay if you overlap Jack a little bit. He's going to be like a dark gray, so no big deal if there's paint there. It'll get covered up. And then the parts of the railing that are closest to the moon, those are the parts that you're going to highlight with this lighter brown color. So you'll do that on the posts and on the rails as well. Next, you're going to mix a light orange using white and orange, and that's going to act as the little lines that extend away from the moon. So it's kind of the same way we did the bridge. You're just going to paint a sort of broken line all the way around that kind of fades out into the purple sky. And then I added more yellow to that mixture so that I'd get an even lighter color, and I went over it again. I also used this lighter color to clean up the edges close to the moon where I saw purple. So you can do that if you notice the same thing. So at this point I wanted to clean up Jack a little bit, so this part's optional, but I took some white paint directly from the tube and I just went around Jack's face and his hands, and just anywhere that I saw there was some excess paint or even the pencil that I wanted to cover up, I did that with my heavy body white acrylic paint. Now we're going to get some black paint. Make sure your brush is clean, and you're just going to paint the curly hill and the background. Don't worry too much about the edges, because if you've ever seen this movie, the edges aren't perfect, so it doesn't need to be a perfect spiral. It's totally fine if it is not perfect. As you get to the wider part of the hill, you might want to switch to a thicker brush, a wider brush, and that will save you some time. Now we finally get to cover up that purple that I painted over 3 times. Alright, next we're going to take some of that black paint, add a little bit of the white to it to mix a gray. I start with this gray that's a little bit lighter, and I end up hating it, so I use it to color in the whole thing, and then I decided to go back in with a darker gray. So if you want to start with a darker gray, that's fine. Although I do think that it looks cool when I do add the darker gray, because it kind of blends in with that lighter gray. And to make it look a little bit more dimensional, you can add the shadow underneath the arm and at the collar, just like I did. So here's the part that I kind of regret, because the Sharpie has a lot of red in it. Even though it's black, it has a lot of red in it. So you can't really see it in the camera, but whenever it would shine in the light, the Sharpie would be red while the acrylic shines kind of white. So it didn't match and it looks really out of place. So I did it, but I do end up painting over it whenever we get to the optional part. We're pretty much done. Be careful not to ruin your Sharpie also, because the paint was still wet and I ran the Sharpie through it, and that was a mess. So now you can be done if you really want to be done. That could be it. That was all your basic supplies. But if you want to do a little bit extra, like I did, I decided to add some purple lines to the hill itself with a lighter purple, but then I thought it wasn't light enough, so I ended up going over it again with a even lighter purple towards the edges. And then I add the blue and the green around, well, the blue around the moon and then the green to the wood, and then I highlight the edge of the wood with some yellow marks. Here's where I'm adding that lighter purple to lighten it up a little bit. And then I decided to go a little darker on Jack's cloak with almost a black, and I wasn't liking the marker at all, so I went over like the whole thing with watered down white paint so that I could just paint in all these details, because I did not like the marker at all. But it doesn't look bad, it's just if you're super picky like me, I didn't like it. But it might not bother you, and that's totally fine. I wanted to further define the edge of the moon here, so I went back in with the orange and blended it into the center, and then darkened the railing with a black towards the edge just to make it a little bit more different from the sides. And this is how it looks. And that's it. If you want to do any finishing touches, you guys can paint the edges of the canvas. I hope you enjoyed watching me paint this. You can definitely do this on your own. It's super easy. It doesn't need to be pretty. You can see that it's very messy. Maybe one thing I might have done is made Jack a little bit bigger, but you know, it's up to you, right? It's your painting with a twist. So I hope you guys liked this. If you want to do any other paint-alongs with me in the future, you can let me know. If you guys want to see me paint live this month, I am doing every single day a live on my Instagram where I am painting an artist trading card like this one that, oh man, my lights are so bright, it's going to be hard to see. There we go. Like this one I did of my friend Anute. I'll link her channel below. She does some makeup stuff. And for real though, her makeup is goals. So I have been doing these every single day this month of October. So if you want to see me paint something live, go ahead and check that out. And then by the time you see this video, if you are interested in having a little card like this made of you, then send me a message to see if I have any spots available. I was only going to do one a day, so I only had 31 spaces, and I so far have had 18 of those spaces taken. So I think I have 13 left, but by the time this airs, that might not be the case. So definitely DM me and see if I do have any availabilities. And if not, definitely check out my website to see other things that I have going on whenever you watch this video. If you do end up painting this, show me what you painted and I will give you guys a shout out on my Instagram. I've already mentioned my Instagram and my website, but here are the handles and the web address so that you guys can find them on your own. Other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day and rest of your week. Happy October, get spooky, get some spooky vibes, and I will see you next week for another spooky themed video. Bye guys!